right at the top of this call. No worries, but welcome to Her STEM Stories, very special episode. I want to share a backstory. So, my parents met at work and had a love marriage in the 1980s India. Growing up, I saw two professionally driven parents who also loved and respected each other a lot. Most of all, I saw an epic friendship that defied all odds. Valentine's Day reminds me of their love and inspires me to interview love stories of people who are passionate about their work, their family, and about each other. When I started Her STEM Story, I realized there are many amazing STEM couples who need to be highlighted. And so many women, especially moms, thrive in STEM with the support of their partners, who are also sometimes in STEM. Gender equality isn't about one gender over the other, it's about collaboration and support to help us all grow together. And what better form of collaboration than a marriage? Today, I'm excited to interview Hannah, a Believe in Your Brilliance Academy alumni and a coach for female engineers, and Goose, who is a comprehensive wealth advisor, for our very special Valentine's Day episode titled Love in STEM. Celebrating Valentine's Day with two brilliant chemical engineers that have experience of working in pulp and paper manufacturing. And after their now 2-year-old daughter was born, they both left manufacturing to start their own businesses. In their amazing journey, they found it all: love, purpose, and balance. We will learn more about how they found this, and if you've been the one looking for all of these three, or even one of these, then they can help you find it too. So let's welcome Hannah and Goose Dunham.
Hey,
Hi.
Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
glad to
having
be here.
us.
And you guys are joining us all the way from Alabama, right?
Yes, that's right. Birmingham, Alabama.
Sweet home, Alabama.
Mhm.
Yes, I love Alabama because I gave my TEDx at University of North Alabama. Like, what are the chances?
Yeah, I remember you
And
said you
I really enjoy this stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Please tell us, how did you guys meet? Tell us a little bit about this STEM love story that we're here to celebrate.
Do you
I'll
want to
let
take this?
her. Her storytelling is way better than mine, so I'll let her take this one.
So when I was in college, I went to Auburn and I started co-oping there. I started co-oping at International Paper, where he was an engineer already. And my first day on the paper machines, I walk out. I couldn't be more overwhelmed by everything that I'm looking at. And all of a sudden, I see this guy I think he'd worked there for a few years already. And I don't know what it was about him other than I just locked my focus on him. And I called my mom that night and I told her that I met the guy I was going to marry. I didn't even know what his last name was, but I was just like, I don't know what it was about him that drew me to him. But, and that was like 10 years ago now. So it worked out.
Amazing. I love it. Goose, do you want to add to that? What's your memory of your first meeting?
So I remember getting back from a meeting, and one of the guys was like, "We just got a co-op, Goose. She's fairly attractive. You probably should not go down there." And so what did I do? I absolutely went down there to see who they were talking about. And it took me probably
Right.
4 months. Like, I resisted for a long, long time. I definitely will give it to
Yeah.
Hannah. She made it happen. It was not me at all. It was not me.
Yeah, that's true. He was
Yeah,
very,
I
very
love it. Oh my God. Say that again. Sorry, Hannah.
Oh, I was just gonna say he was he's very outgoing, but he struggled with the female department, so it took him a while. It took him a while to
Yeah.
well, also we have a pretty good big age gap, and I couldn't even legally drink at that point, so I think that age gap scared him.
Sensitive. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think workplace relationships are a little sensitive anyways. I don't think you can have like love at first sight and like lose your bearings and like not have, not have to think about all these other elements, right?
It took us over a year. We
Mm.
told a couple of our really close friends after about a month or two. But we took us a year to a year and a half before we actually told people at the mill that we were dating. We had to make sure
That's
that
all.
it was gonna
Yeah.
work out before we told anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that women in STEM also face, right? Like, I think there's a stereotype of how engineers should look like, or how people should come to work, or what
Hmm.
the rules are around it. And so I'm sure, like Hannah, like you got a lot of attention when you moved, like started working in a plant. I'm saying it because I got it too, being
Hmm.
the only girl. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you always get a lot of attention in manufacturing plants. How did you work through that, Hannah? Because I think there's something that not it's not talked about as much, especially since we get to talk to a lot of like techies and people who don't work in manufacturing plants. Like when you were a young engineer with all the attention, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know that it really like registered to me a lot when it was happening at that point. I think it took me some time. I was kind of just oblivious, like,
Mm,
and then I think it took me really a few years until like, and I when I had started working there more and more and more people knew me and everything like that. That when I felt like my authority was questioned because I was a female, or like just the uncomfortable staring or like whatever it is. And I kind of like, I would, on especially like outage days when lots of like contractors and different groups of people were in the mill, I would dress like a guy. Like that was just the
mm,
way that it would make me feel most comfortable, was like dress in big overalls, like big jackets. um and I mean, not in a way that I felt was like accepting of their behavior, but it was the reality that I was dealing with. So it felt like whatever I needed to do to make myself feel comfortable to get through the day, that's what I was going to do. And then I think like every situation is kind of different. There are definitely things that I would have done differently if I'd had more experience dealing with those things, like like Hershey kisses being left on my desk and by
oh,
some
wow.
unknown person, and like all just unwanted advances, stuff like
Mm,
that. If I had been in manufacturing for 10 years, I would have dealt with all of those things differently than I
very
did then. I
differently.
just
Yeah.
didn't really know what I was doing. I think it takes time and like mentorship and support to like understand where your boundaries are and how to handle
Mm,
situations like that,
yeah. So,
for
so what
sure.
would be your advice to somebody who's listening to to handle those maybe early on and not have to wait that long?
I think like being willing to be open with another female at the mill about those experiences that you're having, and like
Mm,
and understand from an early age that they're not really acceptable, and that you kind of have to set your boundaries very early on.
mm,
But I just didn't really I was truly like oblivious to the process, as far
right.
as like, okay, this is happening and here's what I'm supposed to do to be able to handle it or like deal
Right.
with it. So a lot of times, I mean, I didn't have any females to talk to about it, but I would like, there was a guy on the machine I'm thinking of, specifically one of the paper machines, that first semester, that he was just an old country guy, like just always had my back, was just super respectful and nice to me. And like, he honestly was my go-to as far as, telling him that something would happen, and he would kind of help me work through it and address it with the person if he needed to. And like, as much as
Right.
I can tell you, like, find a female to help you through
Mm,
that, like, sometimes that's not an option.
no.
So just find somebody that you trust and that
Yeah.
respects you as a female, that can kind of help navigate you through those situations.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think when I was working in manufacturing, I had men were my biggest allies, my biggest
Mhm.
mentors, my best friends, my
Totally.
supporters, and it was hard to strike that kind of relationship with a lot of females at work because I think we were all kind of like looking out for ourselves. It felt like the wild wild west. Like
Yeah.
women didn't want to talk to like lean too much into their femininity or come across as like, oh, she's like that typical girl who's out with girls. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of us anyways growing up were tomboys, but I think it's hard when we tell women who are in these professions, heavy manufacturing, heavy high, it's a very different environment in a plant, to say go look for a woman and like tell her how you feel, and it's like may or may not be taken really well, and
Totally.
to your point, I think I was the best. I had some of the best operators that I would like
Mm-hmm.
collaborate with, work with, ask questions, and some of them actually looked at me as like their daughter, and it was really really
Yeah.
nice
Mm-hmm.
to have that camaraderie. So like I said at the beginning of this call, I'm like, we're not trying to separate the genders. I don't think that's the point. I think the
Yeah.
point is, can we collaborate? Can we coexist? Can we actually allow for better problem solving in the workplace by including everybody? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you reflected a little bit on that topic with me, because I was really curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to add something to that, Goose?
I mean, I think it really opened my eyes watching what she went through.
Mm,
I would tell you I was a prototypical male. Not that I like to admit it, but I was a prototypical male when she got there, and I didn't have anybody to see what they were going through, or really to see the intimacies of the struggles that women have within manufacturing.
yes.
And so just throughout her career, seeing that really changed how I viewed things,
Hmm.
and really made me an advocate for not just her, but other women within those environments, because it is tough.
Hmm.
Um, and they need that support, and they don't always have that support from women because there's just not that many in there. I think
Yeah.
over the course of a 12-year career, I may have managed three, which, that's just crazy to think about, that I managed three women in 12 years out there. So that's probably what I would add,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
for the men listening. Like, you need to be that person.
Right. And I think the biggest thing like men can do is more like, because she was your spouse, it's easier to like now understand all the things from that perspective. Like my husband says it all the time. He's like, I thought racism is whatever, but when I married you, I started to notice all the stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that I was like oblivious to, or like almost like colorblind to. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, now you're talking about my wife, or now you're talking about the
Yeah.
person I really care about. And I feel like that's such an easy switch for people to make, where if you are just like grouping people into one group, or like seeing them as just their color or their gender, might as well like take a minute to be like, hold on, what if this was my wife? Like, would I tolerate this? What if this was my daughter? What if this was my child? Like, would I actually let somebody get away with that remark? And I feel like that's such an easy thing to do for everybody, because we all have families, and when we look at it from that perspective, suddenly a lot of things become really black and white and
Yeah.
not so subtle.
Yeah.
Definitely, that lens really clarifies things for you.
Yeah. Yeah, because now it's important, right? Before it's more like it happens to other people, and it's really not
Right.
important
Yeah,
to
you can like remove yourself from it versus if
them.
you start viewing like all of these women that you're working with as like, somebody in your family, if they were someone in your family out there, like you can't just ignore it anymore. It like has to be addressed, and you have to figure out a way to be an advocate, because you would if it was your sister or your
Right.
daughter. So why wouldn't you for this girl too?
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk a little bit about your STEM stories individually. So tell us, Hannah, how did you get in this field? How did you become a chemical engineer,
Mhm.
um, doing something so interesting?
Yeah, so basically, it's kind of a silly story. First of all, I knew that I wanted to be an engineer because my grandfather was an engineer. He's, highly respected in my family. And I've always looked up to him so much for everything that, he's done. And I had really no clue what an engineer did. I knew he worked for like Redstone Arsenal doing missile defense. And I was like, that is so cool. So then I went to the our college orientation, chose my major. He was an electrical engineer. That didn't seem right to me. My brother had tried aerospace, and like he hadn't made it very far. And like the next one on the list was chemical, and I was like, let's just go for it. I don't know, like I'll change it later if I decide a different path in engineering is best for me. And I didn't ever. I just stuck with it the whole time, even though it was hard and I made bad grades and failed classes, like just stuck with it. I got through. And then, yeah, when I was about my junior year of college, I started co-oping with International Paper at the manufacturing site where I met Goose. And right before I graduated, we got engaged. So I got a full-time job offer from them, and it felt like obviously I'm going to go back to work for them. I really enjoyed my co-op time there for the most part. So yeah, that's where I started pulp and paper manufacturing, and then we moved to a different company a couple years after that, and spent another 5 years up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, working for West Rock. And then yeah, we had our daughter, and I quit my job, and then shortly after that, Goose quit his job. So we both have left manufacturing, even though we're still engineers at heart, for sure. So that's kind of
Yeah, I
for me.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Goose?
So, I mean, all the credit goes to my mom for me becoming an engineer, chemical engineer specifically. I loved chemistry. I was going to go be a chemistry major. I wanted to go to be an orthopedic surgeon. That was really what my dream was to be an orthopedic surgeon. I had tons of injuries in high school, knee surgery, shoulder surgery, hand surgery. So it seemed like that was my calling, was to go be a doctor. And really and she said, my mom took me there and was like, you've got two choices. You can go be a chemistry major, she said, or let's go talk to the engineering head. And so I did. And he sold me on the fact that if I decided I did not want to go to med school, that my job opportunities would be much better as an engineer. And he sold me on the fact that going to med school and being an engineer gives you one leg up. So, but without mom taking me up there and really saying, hey, you're going to at least meet with this guy, I would have never gone into engineering. And obviously it's worked out really, really well. Went into paper manufacturing, mostly because it was my only job offer. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I came out in 2010, and if anybody remembers what 2010 looked like, it wasn't good. Yeah. So they were really the only industry hiring at the time because, the economy wasn't very good. And it was a great career choice for me. I loved every minute of my 12. I won't say every minute. I enjoyed I enjoyed most of my time in engineering, in manufacturing. I think the people that work in manufacturing, there's nobody like them. Just they're hard-nosed people. They're working their butts off, really gathering around each other. So I fit right in and love the people that I worked with.
Especially you combine that with the South, it's incredible.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. My second, no, not my second, but my third rotation was in a plant in Scottsville, Texas, which is like the last town in Texas before Louisiana starts. It's literally in the middle of a highway where you have to you're going at 100 miles an hour and you have to take a left turn. And it's like, how do we not die doing this every single day? Like that's the hardest. That was my question every time. But it was so much fun, wonderful people, and always open their hearts and their homes for me. And I love the South, honestly. I have no qualms. And when I hear stories about South about being so incredibly opposite of my own experience, I'm like, I'm sorry that was your experience, but I genuinely enjoyed the people. And you mix that with manufacturing where people are passionate, like genuinely they care about what they make. And on the surface, people think it's just paper. It's just, I used to make cables, so it's just cables. It's just this. I'm like, but that's what runs the world. Like, how come that doesn't excite you? Like, for me, it was like, we connect the world. Like, I love that we make cables.
And they're in such small communities, typically, these big manufacturing plants, and they really are the heartbeat of that small economy. So the people that work there are heavily invested in what's going on at the mill. And I think that really shows just in their passion and showing up every single day. And not to mention in small towns like that, you get big families all working together at the mill in
Yes.
different departments or even together. And,
Yeah.
brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws and people,
Generations.
never know who is
Yeah.
related when you talk to one person at a plant, which so you have to be careful, but
Yeah, like
also like,
generations. Yeah,
yeah,
like some
yeah,
people tell me like this is the same machine my father worked at, the same machine I
yes,
work at, and
yeah,
it's just I find it so incredible. I think that's kind of like a lost thing now. Like if manufacturing continues to leave America, so going to some of these towns when they tell you like even paper mills, right? Like steel and
mhm,
paper suffered so much. Like in Pennsylvania, there are ghost towns, like so
yeah,
many ghost towns because the mills just shut down and people just had to leave, and it's eerie. Like they
yes,
just left. Like there's just clothes hanging in the boutiques and stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
and to
mhm,
me, like that's what manufacturing is. Like you said, Hannah, like it builds towns, it builds
mhm,
families, and as much as tech can bring in a lot of money and a lot of cash and a lot of things, it's still like a very new industry. It's very volatile. It's not.
yeah,
It doesn't have the heart yet that manufacturing has. Is
yeah,
how I feel.
I totally agree, for
Mhm.
sure.
I love it. Excellent. So now tell us a little bit about your pivot. So you both left manufacturing to continue to support this ecosystem in a different format. So
Mhm.
let's start with you, Hannah. Like how is your work now relate like either inspired by or even pushing forth like what you were doing in manufacturing or how you were involved in STEM, and what does it look like now that you've kind of left?
Yeah, so when Goose and I both were, up had worked our way up the ranks in manufacturing, and we're both department managers, and we were working just crazy hours, like always on call, working weekends, stuff like that. So when we got pregnant with our daughter, we really like had to make the decision that one of us was going to stay home with her. And I had kind of gotten to a point where I was a little bit burnt out in my career, wanted to get a master's degree, all that stuff. So it lined up well with a career pause for me. So I stayed home with my daughter for 18 months, started getting my master's, all that kind of stuff. And then she got to the point where she's walking, and I was like, we're both a little bored of each other. Like, what's next for me? So, yeah, I started my business last summer in June, and just really with the whole idea of being able to go back into manufacturing environments and support their
Mm.
female engineers. So, oh,
It's okay.
Sorry. Here we
No
go.
worries.
so throughout my entire time in manufacturing, I just found the lack of support for females really difficult to navigate.
Mm.
I think everyone told you kind of like to go find a mentor, but then you didn't really have any resources to do that. You may like have known females in manufacturing, but then if they're at the same plant as you, it's feels uncomfortable to be asking them to mentor you and they're so busy, or then maybe
Mm.
they work for a different company and then it feels weird. So just I was constantly kind of hitting a wall as far as like finding somebody to support my unique journey as a female in
Mm.
manufacturing. And that was just frustrating to me that I felt like all the men around me, obviously these were heavily male dominated industries,
Mhm.
had tons of mentors that they could go to and get insight from, and just like have somebody normalize the experience of being an engineer in this environment. And I never had that. So when I started thinking about what kind of company that I wanted to build, it really that was the main focus, is like find female engineers who are struggling in these industries and support them in whatever way that I can. So right now that looks like individual coaching with
Mm.
female engineers, yeah, that are just struggling to navigate it, and also a lot of moms as well who come back after maternity leave and kind of find the workplace different than with how they left it, and just
Mhm.
like working through those issues, gaining confidence to speak up in meetings. That's the number one on
Big
every
one, I
female
know.
engineer's mind, is like, how do I gain confidence to be myself, to be a female in this industry, not to assimilate and be a man. I
Mm.
know that's like this is a big one for you, Prasha, but
Yeah.
how do I play to my unique strengths as a
Yes.
female in this
Mhm.
industry? And I think that it's hard to do that without support. So I hope to fill that void for some females out there.
Yes. I love it. Not for some. I think you're on your way to fill that for thousands and hopefully keep them, right? I think
Yeah.
that's the big issue here is that leaky pipeline of like, I saw it happen within the 7 years I was there. At my fifth year, every department head was was a woman. at the top of that. By the time it was my seventh year, everybody had left, and we were back to the same old. And then I left too, because I'm like, okay, now everybody left, so it seems like maybe it's time, you know. And
Yeah.
so that kind of also solidifies the numbers of like 40% STEM women leave STEM professions at less than 5 years. So it's crazy, you know. So we can keep sending girls to coding camps, and we can keep filling up these graduate programs with girls, but if we can't actually hold that talent, then something's really wrong. So
Yeah.
I feel like the work you're doing should be prioritized in industry, especially like manufacturing, and like especially because you bring that with you. It's such a niche space, but every industry should prioritize it. And I think tech has a lot more resources. You know, that was always my frustration. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the frustration I had, was like, oh, you're going to conferences and you're doing all these other things, and we can't even leave the plant for like a Saturday sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's a very unique set of challenges that people have. So
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit compounded by, like, you know, the companies that I work for are Fortune 500 companies, enormous headquarters
yeah.
in big cities, and often the headquarters, you know, the headquarter environment had a lot of that support that was working
Yeah.
really well for the females there. And then you get down to the mill environment where there are no females on the lead team. The entire 8 years I was in manufacturing, never
Wow.
had one female on a lead team. Like,
Mhm.
so I'm sitting there seeing that there's no one that looks like me on in these tables. Like, how am I ever going to get there? And then they're trying to like fill that void for me by these like resource groups and things like that really do not translate on a mill level. I think that was always my biggest frustration, is like,
Yes.
it felt like the people making the calls as far as like how to support women in the workplace like did not understand what my day-to-day life was like. So really, we're just like missing the mark altogether. That's why it's really important to me. Like, I don't want to work if I work with corporate, I'm not going to work with the headquarters people. I want to work in the mill.
Oh, yeah.
That's really, I think, where we're
Yeah.
missing the pipeline of women. They're leaving in the mill environment. They're never going to get to headquarters if we don't support them where they're at in those
Yeah.
spaces.
Oh, for sure. What about you, Goose? What do you do now that you've said bye to
So I think
manufacturing?
that this is going to sound funny probably, but I think my career change was like 20 years in the making, which really meant it started at like 14. 13, 14 is really when I got heavy into personal finance. And have always loved it. I've always loved investing, have always loved the stock market, to the point to where I went into engineering, and I was kind of the local person that everybody came to when they had questions about what to do or what's happening in the in the markets and why a Fed decision mattered. I remember sitting in a training class. I was making trades, and somebody's like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Well, they just downgraded the U.S. credit rating. This is a great time to buy in." And they were like, "That seems like terrifying to me." And so like I really became that local expert. Didn't matter whether I was at IP in Selma or whether I was in West Rock. And as I started to learn more, there's really a need with the engineers in these facilities don't have the time. They don't have they just can't put the effort in. They're already putting 60, 70 hours in. And then if you look at the operator side of things, they grew up in that small town and they haven't been exposed to the options out there. And, you know, they make a great living, but how can we improve that and not just improve their living, but how do I get them to where they're not walking 8 miles a week or a day on concrete? I mean, I just saw so many people at the age of 60 getting knee replacements because of the just complete strain on the body. And I was like, there's got to be a better way for these individuals. And so that's really where the need and my passion was born for. And my dad has always been in the business. So I grew up with it, and I think he put this passion in me. But when I got into manufacturing, I saw the need firsthand. I saw the need and the impact that you can make on so many lives. And I think it's an underserved area of, at least from my perspective, I think manufacturing is underserved in this area.
Mhm.
People kind of see that blue collar label and they don't want to deal with it. And
Oh,
I personally hate that. They're great people, hardworking, and they
yeah.
need as much support as anybody.
Yeah. I love that. Excellent. So it seems like both of you are kind of doing more purposeful work now. I mean, even before it was purposeful to you, but would you say that you're on your way to doing like serving your life's purpose or at least being on the path to find it? Is that a fair statement?
This
I, I Go ahead.
Well, this was always a big difference between Goose and I. Goose could find purpose every single day, no matter what. He would wake up like just, I'm not a morning person anyways, and he absolutely is. So, but he would wake up every day just like, let's go make somebody's life better today. And for me, it
Mm,
was like, so he found a lot of purpose in doing that in manufacturing, even though it wasn't necessarily maybe his calling. For me, it was like, we're making copy paper and pizza boxes. I don't feel passion about either of those two things. So like the disconnect for me was always like the end product. It doesn't align with my values and goals
right.
in life. So I could like get through every single day by, making someone's life better and helping people out and problem solving and doing all those things that make me feel good. But like at the end of the day, it wasn't anything that I really could, get excited about. So
Mm,
I think when I made this pivot, like, all of a sudden a light bulb kind of came on that's like, I finally get to do what I feel like I've
mm.
always was meant to do. So I
I
think
love
that
that.
for me has been such a big pivot. Now, like the end goal of what I do, which is like, helping women understand their confidence in these male dominated industries and help them get the career that they deserve and
Mm.
want. Like that's the end goal that really speaks to me. That's like the passion that drives me. So 100% with what you said.
I love it.
Mhm.
What about you, Goose?
And I agree. And but to Hannah's point, I always found purpose at the mill because I always felt that at least on the hourly employees never felt heard. And so I kind of made it that my purpose.
Mm,
Let me make sure they feel heard, and let's see if we can't make their life just a little bit better today.
mm,
And sometimes it was taking a scaffolding down that was just in the way. That was a
that-
nuisance, right?
Mhm.
And then making a machine run better so they can have more time to converse in the control room. So I always found that passion and purpose within that.
mhm,
But now it aligns with what I love doing. So
mm,
now I get to do both. Now I get to every day help people's lives get better while also doing what I love to do, which is dealing with personal finance, which is dealing with the stock market and
right.
investing and, helping people set big goals. I think so many people don't have that chance to set big goals because they don't know how.
Yeah.
And so now I get to do that every day, which is just wonderful.
I love it. You guys had such busy lives up to this point, having the baby, working at the mill, like so many hours. I think Hannah, you mentioned sometime like 80 hours a week at one point. Like you guys had such a busy life. How did you find the time and the focus to actually make these pivots? Because I think
Mhm.
engineers are listening to this, or even people who work in these highly demanding workplaces are wondering, okay, good for you guys. I just don't know how I can actually find it, or how I can
Mhm.
actually do what I really love doing, and still add value to people, but also to my own life by
Mhm.
monetizing it or all these other things that come with it. So, what would be your advice to somebody who's in your shoes, 5 years younger, 10 years younger, but just does not know how to walk this path?
Yeah, for me, like when I was at the mill and when we lived in Chattanooga, I was starting to feel like this probably isn't something that I'm going to be able to do for the rest of my life. Like my heart isn't in it, even though I loved my job, I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved going there every single day. But I just knew that it wasn't, like I said, aligning with kind of my values and goals in life. So it was just long-term sustainability like wasn't there. And truly, I started from, just literally listing out all of the things I like to do and what,
Mm,
kind of going through a values exercise of like trying to figure out
mm,
what it was that I felt like could fulfill me for the rest of my life. So that looked like taking cooking classes. I thought maybe I wanted to be a chef. Literally, turns out that's just a hobby. I started shadowing a prosthetist because I thought maybe I wanted to do prosthetics and orthotics. And this is all while I was working a full-time job. Like
Mm-hmm.
I started taking core classes to join that master's program. I ended up joining an online program for mental health counseling. I did that for 2 years while I was in, again, still working. I mean, and all of this had to be conversations that I had with my bosses. And well, I was, fortunate that they were understanding that, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And they, gave me the kind of the grace to like take some time and figure it out, as long as like my work didn't suffer and everything. But honestly, it was a grind. Like it put more hours on at the end of every single day of mine. But I think over time, it led me to the master's program that I'm in. It introduced me to kind of like the world of coaching and consulting. And, I think it's easy to like look back in hindsight and be like, I ended up exactly where I'm supposed to be, but I wouldn't have ended up here if it hadn't been for those classes I took at night. The guy that I shadowed at the prosthetist, the cooking classes, like I wouldn't be right here if I hadn't done all of that stuff. So sometimes you kind of have to like throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Like I know that's maybe not like the best life advice for somebody, but like if you really don't know where you want your path to go, sometimes you got to try a lot of stuff until you finally land on what it is that you're passionate about. And it can take a long time. I think I was really fortunate. I remember going on a million walks through our neighborhood in Chattanooga talking like, well, I think I might do cooking classes now. I think I might go shadow and he never once made me feel like, okay, you're insane. We can't keep doing this. Like you have to figure out what you want to do and you have to stick with it. Every single time I made a pivot, he somehow
took my head and just
bored.
okay.
I will never understand how he was able to support me through all
That's the
that.
secret to a happy marriage, a quiet husband who just nods.
Totally. But
It
I
says,
mean,
here she goes again.
I know. But I mean, now it's so clear like how all of those things led me to where I'm supposed to be now. And I was just lucky to have a husband who was on, just along for the ride. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess mine was a very different path because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that ultimately this is where I was supposed to be. So I didn't have near the journey to find what it was. But the one thing you have to be willing to do, and hopefully this doesn't offend anybody, but you have to embrace the suck. I mean, the fact is it sucked getting my licenses when I was working at the mill. It sucked getting up at 4:30 in the morning so I could study 2 hours before I got to the mill.
With a newborn.
Like that, it wasn't fun. And then even after the transition, regardless of how successful you've been, and this was probably the biggest struggle, easily the biggest struggle I had, was I made the transition and I wasn't, the acceleration of my career wasn't near what I expected it to be. I thought I was going to switch careers and in 2 months I was going to be setting the world on fire. And that's not the way it works. I don't care what you see on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever. That first year, maybe 2 years, it's not going to be fun. You're going to have to make sacrifices both personally as well as monetarily. I mean, we took a big cut to pursue dreams, but we knew what we were doing, and we knew that it wasn't going to be great at all times, but we knew that at the end of it, when we got through whatever that suck period happens to be, that we were going to be happier for it. I can be there for my daughter, which I would not have been doing what I was doing, which was the most important thing for me.
I love that. No, that's the truth. I think it's just, you guys are just repeating my own journey too. It's like I was waking up at 4, I was driving to Boston, I was taking classes, I was talking to all these startup people, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna take this course and that course and everything. I was doing everything under the sun to like somehow figure this out, because to me it was like, oh, there's so much more to, like, now that we have the money and a little bit of that freedom of choice, I want to follow this. But I think it takes that drive, and I think you have to throw balance out for a good amount of period where I think balance is
Yeah.
a myth of like,
Yeah.
somehow you're going to strike it all the time. It's like, no, there will be seasons, right? Like you have winters, which are really hard. And then, maybe you see some summers in between, but it's never going to be like this perfect balanced life that you may, again,
I,
like you may see online.
yeah. And I would add, Hannah said it, but be open with the company that you're working with. I let them know
Yes.
6 months. I said, hey, I want y'all to know that I'm quitting in 6 months. No 2 week notice. The company respects you a lot more for it. And they were very, very supportive the entire way more supportive than I expected. But I think that's a fear that people have is they're just going to walk me out, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is
No.
not saying nobody out there will, but most of them, especially if you're switching careers totally, not going to a competitor, they're going to be so supportive of you.
Yeah. In fact, they offered me a role because they knew I was working in this D&I space. So I actually got a D&I role after my TEDx and stuff came out, and they involved me in all of this. And they're like, "Oh my God, like you're such a great big brand outside, and we want to, use your expertise." And I was like, "Wow, this is nice." Like, I mean, if I wanted to stay in corporate, I could have just built another career right in there with the work that I was doing outside. And one thing that I tell people all the time is like this simple conflict of interest communication needs to be had, right? Like where if you are pursuing all these other things, just you need to fill a form. You need to tell the HR, like this has to happen. Otherwise, you will be in a bigger trouble if somebody finds out, and you will not be able to go all the way either. So ever since I started the podcast, day one, I think the first thing I did was it wasn't even a thing. Like I couldn't even add a link because there was no link. I just filled the form. I'm like, dude, I'm doing this. I hope everyone's okay with it. And nobody messaged me. Nobody said a thing. And it was just like really like a peace of mind that it's like official, and I can and I can tell my bosses and things like that. But that gives you that space and mental space to figure some of these things out versus being worried all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Excellent. So now that you guys are like doing all these other things, how do you guys find balance? The days that you can actually afford to find it, how do you find it, and what would be your advice to young couples with kids trying to grow their STEM careers, trying to also grow their businesses, or trying to find their purpose in life? It's a lot of things on their plate. What are some tips that you have for people who are craving that balance or some semblance of like, how they can take care of themselves?
I think the first thing that I would like to do is just normalize the fact that we have struggled so hard over the course of the last 2 years, with me leaving my job and then, running a department of 120 and then coming home and just taking care of this one tiny baby who can't say anything to me. That was identity wise a huge transition for me. And then when my husband left manufacturing to start this business, huge identity transition for him. And I think just now kind of started feeling, in the last 4 or 5 months, started feeling like we got through all of that. We can breathe and actually even focus on the balance piece of it. Cause that was very much just so much like, so much priority went into like getting our mental health right during those transition phases. And now I feel like we're at the place where we're like, okay, now let's like create balance in our lives now that we have the like capacity to. So I think the number one thing, we've been doing this since the beginning of our marriage and have dropped it off at times and picked it back up, but we, have like very intentional meetings on Sunday nights to talk about what we're going to eat that week. We talk about what meetings we have, which is, very, very vital. Pretty much childcare gets split 50-50. So he takes our daughter in the morning, I pick her up in the afternoons, like everything like that gets talked about. What kind of different schedules, are we taking dinner to some friend that had a baby, like all of that. Like you have to get on the same page. We've, both of us have gone through, as we've gotten busier and busier with our businesses, like we've both had to cancel meetings at the last minute because our planning was off. So these kind of meetings are really important. And get a fridge calendar. That's like saved our lives in the last few months. It just has everything, right there on for us to be able to see. I think that's the big thing is like, communication sounds so like cliche, but like practically speaking, that's how we do it. Like going through every single thing, who's taking care of what. And then, we're really, really lucky to have a family here that can, when we are both like really needing some time, either alone or just together, that we can take our daughter to them and just literally sometimes just spend time regrouping or like cleaning our house without a 2-year-old, trying to jump on the vacuum cleaner and, just like it, giving us kind of the space to take care of all of those things that sometimes like fall off if we don't have the time to do it. So I think that just takes like investing in yourself and each other and being willing to do that really counts. So it's helped us out a lot. It's
Yeah.
She's a little person.
But I don't know if we're still live or not. But I would say that it definitely is about the communication. It's something that we have struggled with in the past, and we have had to make.
Yes, I'm here. I think it's everyone's internet today.
It's everyone's.
Maybe it's the storm or something. I don't know.
Who knows?
Go ahead.
But,
sorry about that.
No problem. But it's really making that dedicated effort to communicate. Mm-hmm. And for many men, it's I will say, because it's super difficult for me, is communicating feelings. Like it took me probably 3 or 4 months to open up to Hannah about how much I was struggling internally about the transition, right? And almost immediately after I finally told her, it took me about 2 weeks to get out of that slump after I told her. So I suffered for 4 months internally, and she could see it, but I wouldn't open up about it. And then boom, I talked to her about it, and it's like a switch was flipped and off I go to the races again. So it, be open. And if you need to find a guys group, I found one on LinkedIn that we just started. It's a little book club. And it's like, you know what? Meet some strangers because they don't know you. So, it's easier to kind of sometimes be open with people you don't know, which I'm really excited about. So,
yeah. And I mean, I'll just bug him to death. If I know like he will, like just a couple of nights ago, we got home from our work days and everything like that. Something just felt off to me. I mean, we've been together for a million years, so I can kind of tell at this point, but I'm like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, nothing, I'm good. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, and eventually, he's like, well, we've been working so much lately. My best friend just had a baby, so I've been spending so much time with her. And like, he's like, I feel like we haven't even had a conversation in the last 2 weeks, but then that sets us on a path for like, okay, I made sure that, last night, tonight, I'm not working after the kid goes to bed so that, we can have that time to like reconnect and talk and stuff like that. So, bug the crap out of them if you need to get
nagging works. Like I'll tell my husband, I'm like, your energy is off. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what to do about it. Like, I'm like, I don't like this right now. Like, what's happening? So, so I think what you guys shared is a very good advice. Like, if you guys are leaders in your jobs, in your businesses, bring those best practices into your family, like calendars, like meetings, like what needs to get done. My favorite is like the 4 box. What went well? What did not go well? What do you need help with? What's new? Like, let's talk about it. Like, let's talk about it. If you have a strenuous marriage, do it daily. If you think you're in a good place, move the meetings apart. Like, it's the same thing, but somebody has to take the leadership role, but then also invite the other person to collaborate. It's not so much a power struggle or manipulation. It's more like, look, I can get this all organized, and if you can be open and honest, like maybe that's your role right now. I think people focus on wrong stuff. People focus on, oh, he should book the meeting or he should do it. It's like, no, but maybe it's not his strength, and I think that it's the same thing. I think if you want to be successful in your career, you have to be a leader and you have to collaborate and you have to work on your, work with your strengths and collaborate for your weaknesses. The same thing in a marriage too. Like, otherwise, and the more busier you get, the more structure I think you need in life. Otherwise, you're just going to keep going in circles and nothing comes out of it. So I really, really love that. And I appreciate you guys being so honest about your
Yeah, just to that
challenges.
point, for a Valentine's shout out, we have never been out to eat together on Valentine's Day because it's not a strength of his to make reservations on time.
Yes, same
So,
my husband. He's like, I
yeah.
understood it and I don't fight for it. I mean, this is a
Oh,
dumb
that's
thing
how
to
I
fight
am
for,
too.
right? Like it's like the socks.
Yeah.
Like I think I say this all the time. I see the socks, they're right here. You'll never pick them up. And I have two options, right? That I like lose my marriage on this topic, like keep
Yeah.
fighting. Or I can
Mhm.
say, oh, the socks again.
Just
But
sucks for me.
I refuse that a pair of socks can get between us, right? So
Yeah.
I think you should refuse to let a dinner reservation get in the
Now
way.
it's like a thing. We will not go out to eat on
No, we
Valentine's Day.
don't
It's
celebrate it
tradition that
either.
we
No.
don't go out to eat.
I
So,
love it. Excellent. This was so lovely. Thank you so much for sharing
yeah.
all of these amazing suggestions and advices. My last few questions are: what's the biggest piece of advice that you'll give to couples who are listening today?
Biggest piece of advice. I think so many times, I'm very like stubborn and can be, really like hard-headed and everything like that. And that often makes me feel like we're on different teams. Like, we're fighting against each other instead of fighting with each other. So I think just like you would like make a career goal or a business goal or,
Mm,
whatever that is, like make a marriage goal that like y'all are both working together towards. I think that that's like the number one thing that I've had to learn over the course of our marriage is like we're not fighting against each other. Like every time we've gotten in a fight, we have to sit there and be like, no, 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 like we're in this together. There's no point for us to like continue knocking heads. Like,
yes.
how can we turn this around and look at it as a problem that we're solving together instead of like going at each other about it. So that mentality shift is just like a big one for me.
I love it.
And I would say, and I think that in general, our generation has done better, but there in the household nowadays, there aren't gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
Once she stopped breastfeeding, which obviously I can't do, there are no gender roles. I
Mm-hmm.
cook, I clean, she cooks, she cleans. I take Delilah to the school, she picks her up. We've truly tried to create a 50-50 household, and it's the only way if you both have careers that you want to be successful in, and you don't want to make somebody give something up. The only way to make it work
Yeah.
is to be 50-50.
Yeah.
And to get rid of those stereotypical gender roles that people talk about.
Yeah. And the amount of chores in America are crazy. I mean, you can't have gender roles. Like it's like no maids. I mean, I grew up with maids and a lot of help, and they're like 6 staff people for every even middle class households, right? Like have help in India.
Mhm.
And so I sometimes wonder, I'm like, Mom, did we just go backwards? Like I feel like that was life better there? Like
Seriously. Yeah.
like I never had to clean toilets, but here, yeah. So, but I think that is the only way. I think you're right. Like just 50-50 and like team and building a team together, collaborating towards a common goal. Like
Mhm.
that's some excellent advice. So how can people work with you guys? If they're listening and they're interested in what you do, tell us where they can find you and how they can actually work with you.
Yeah, for me, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Hannah Burns Dunham. Just Google me and then, or search me on LinkedIn. And then all my information's there. You can book a call with me to get started. If you want that, free little discovery call, and we get started from there and go through the whole process for the 12-week engineering program that I have. So
I love it.
Yeah.
And really, it's the same for me. Follow me on LinkedIn, message me. We set up a call, discuss what I do and where I may be of help to people. I think that's the one thing I've learned is almost everybody needs help, but it's always in a different area when it comes to that sort of thing. And sometimes discovering where that area is sometimes difficult. So follow me on LinkedIn. I tell a lot of manufacturing stories and relate it back to finance.
Yeah, both of you do. And I'm gonna say a really nice what do you call it? Like my brain is like completely frozen. Like the internet was a few minutes ago. But I'm gonna give you guys a title in 1 second. But last question I have is, what is each of yours favorite books? Like one favorite book each.
Oh gosh, can you take this one first?
Okay, I'm gonna give two. So one, I love Upstream by Dan Heath. It is an incredible book about solving problems before they're problems. It truly is a wonderful book. And then I love Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. His new book is out of this world in terms of everything that he talks about and really how we should flip the script on how we define potential. It's a wonderful book too.
Okay, I'm gonna go with my favorite book I read last year because I don't think don't have enough time to go through all my favorite books. But I read fiction only almost. I'm not a big nonfiction person, so I read Lessons in Chemistry last year. It's an Apple TV show now. And it's just like a really good story of a woman kind of trying to fight the status quo in the STEM field and making it kind of her own way in a kind of an unexpected path. And it's a really, really good read. So
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing all your wisdom, your time, and all the work that you've been doing. So the title I was going to give you guys, you guys are like the Chip and Joanna Gaines of like the STEM field. Like that's kind of the feel I get from everything you both do. I don't know if you feel that way when you go into their section in Target, and there's this soul in like everything they do. And I think it's reflective in the work you do, the soul. It's that's what I'm trying to get to, is like you're very purposeful, intentional, and memorable.
Thank you. Well, there's no greater compliment because I love them. So.
And I guess the Southern accent helps too. So.
Yeah.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much, Hannah and Goose, for taking the time celebrating Valentine's Day with us. And I invite everybody to follow you on LinkedIn, and cannot wait to see all the amazing things that the future has in store for you and your family. We're going to link everything to your LinkedIn and how people can find you in our episode notes. And with that was our Valentine's Day special. I wish happy Valentine's Day to everybody.